I think we just have to cold open the show today. Alinea got demoted to 2 Michelin stars. Ray, I sent this to you literally like minutes before we started recording because as of looking at this 37 minutes ago, Grant Achatz posted on his Instagram. We're going to get into that and so many other stories. This is the Repertoire podcast. This is another Repertoire report. Ray and I are going to just jam on some industry stories that, for Ray being sick, I'm actually on paternity leave. So my wife and I had another baby. And so just stoked that has happened. But I think that there's like just obvious family things that need to take precedent over recording the podcast. And because of that, we are greeted with not just like a bunch of stories that have piled up and Ray and I are excited to jam on today, but then like breaking news. Like we don't normally break the news on this show, but I saw it. And I think that we're going to caveat all of this with the fact that like we haven't seen official news from Michelin yet. If you go on the Michelin app or the Michelin website, Alinea is still a 3-star restaurant, but we're going to get into some of the implications of why this is the case, and the timelines really kind of matter here. Anything that initially kind of like came up in your brain as you saw this news, Ray?
You texted me, my jaw dropped, obviously, because, living near Chicago, Alinea is a mainstay. And then you texted me, do you think Grant was hacked? And in my world, in the scheme of things, it's funny that your brain went to first, Grant Achatz must be hacked and this can't be true, over him losing his 3rd star. So maybe we set the table with that, where it's like, that's how crazy this kind of feels.
Yeah, and so Grant is an account with almost 1 million followers on Instagram. I will read the text directly here. I
Yeah.
have it screenshotted just in case, again, this is a hack, and I just caveat, because, again, the timeline matters here. Grant says, quote, "We were disappointed to learn of our at Michelin guide demotion to 2 stars. For 20 years, Alinea has been devoted to pushing creativity, rigor, and the pursuit of perfection in our craft. That commitment remains as unwavering today as it was on day one, and we will continue until the back door of 1723 locks for the last time. Congratulations to all the 2025 Michelin Guide recipients. Your dedication, talent, and hospitality continue to elevate our industry." End quote. There's a bunch of, not like a ton of comments. There's like 3,000 people that have liked it. We are going on, again, like 30 minutes of this being live. Comments are still kind of rolling in here. People kind of like bolstering Grant up, saying, this was still a 3-star quality experience that I just had. I can get into some personal experiences that I've had at Alinea in recent years as compared to back in 2011, I think, when I first had my, like mind-blowing experience at Alinea. So again, with the caveats being said, the timeline I think is important to bring up here. So Philadelphia next week on November 18th is going to be hosting the Michelin Guide Northeast Cities ceremony. And that's going to cover New York and Chicago and DC in that ceremony. And so for those that might not be familiar, how it used to work with Michelin is they would call the chef owner to announce you have been either given stars or we have demoted your ranking in the Michelin Guide. And it was always this kind of like tense moment where you would see videos and recordings of these people getting the phone call. And it was this like either exuberant excitement of like, oh my God, this is amazing, let's pop some champagne. Or it is just this kind of like, tail between your legs kind of moment. And so I'm kind of confused because, Ray, what you and I have seen over the past couple of weeks and months and years is that all of this news does not come out until the day of the ceremony. But I think that a little bit of this is maybe it's the caliber of restaurant in Alinea, like 3 stars for how long Alinea has had 3 stars. It's a really, really big deal. I was doing some digging, and Alinea has never not had 3 Michelin stars for the listener. I just think that's a fascinating like case study in all of this stuff. So again, I have to kind of go back and get my numbers exactly right because I was trying to get the exact date when I was researching this story very, very last minute. 2010 or 2011, people are quoting both. Alinea just got 3 Michelin stars out of the gate. It opened in 2005, and Chicago did not have a Michelin guide for those first 5 years of Alinea being open. So whether it's, again, like 2010, 2011, Alinea has never had to be a 1-star restaurant going to 2 stars, going to 3 stars. And it really shocked the industry when that happened. Because one, Grant was doing like real modernist stuff in a time when that was for Spain. That was for, restaurants maybe in New York, but like Chicago to do some of this stuff, it really was like a Vanguard-esque display of prowess in how he was able to kind of like go from this classical training and then at French Laundry and then kind of like do a stage at El Bulli and then open Alinea with such dramatic results from a Michelin perspective. And so, also, from a personal context point, Ray, you talked about how you're in Illinois and you're close to Chicago. I also was like thinking about all of these people in the zeitgeist that we platform and we really kind of like pedestalize. with Curtis Duffy being the first chef that I worked for coming out of culinary school. And I was in that, kitchen seeing the way that they were thinking about going from his success at Avenues and having 2 stars to going at Grace to try to get 3 stars. And it was this like the documentary was being shot there. And there was very much so this, in the For Grace documentary, for those that haven't watched it, Grant literally says something to the effect of like, Curtis is going to try to get 3 stars and we'll see if he does it. Basically, it's like this very competitive, way of doing things. What's also important, and we've covered some of this on the show before, Nick Kokonis, who was Grant's original business partner in Alinea, is no longer partnered. He basically like divested from the business, and Nick is doing his own stuff. Grant has kind of been on his own. Grant has also, from what I've been seeing, he posts on Instagram, he's been like taking a lot of family time. He's been, I think, with a new partner. There's been a lot of travel that Grant's been doing. And so a lot of this is just kind of like very, it's not that I'm trying to point the finger at one single thing, but I think that there is a little bit of like, Alinea has changed. I will just quickly add my last personal experience before I get some of your thoughts here, Ray, is I had a meal at Alinea almost 3 years ago. And I have not shared my This Place Called video on that restaurant experience. The reason being is, one, it was just kind of a interesting way of me having the meal. It was from a client. They had a lot of success working with me, and we ended up deciding to meet in Chicago to celebrate at Alinea at the chef's table. That was like this big glass room right next to the kitchen. And long story short, I will, this actually might be the catalyst that makes me actually put out that video, is it was not a good experience, in my opinion. And so what I have here, I've never shared this, but I have all these menus kind of like up on my wall in my office here. And I have both Alinea menus from the 2 times that I've ever had the pleasure of eating there next to each other on the wall. And the first one is from, I'm pretty sure, 2011. And the other one is from 2022, almost 10 years later. They're very different experiences. I think they're very different restaurants. I was not impressed with a lot of the execution pieces that I saw at Alinea. I think what they claim to stand for and what you see when you go to eat that food is not the same as what it was ages ago. We're going to talk about some of the dining out stuff on a future story, but this is like at the 3 Michelin star cutting edge level. And so I guess I'm saying this because it is a really big deal if Alinea ends up losing their star. I'm almost positive that will mean that Smith is the only 3 Michelin star restaurant in Chicago.
Correct.
And that is also a Alinea alum. For those that don't know, Chef John Shields and his wife Karen, they worked at Alinea together. I'm almost positive. And then John did for sure. I don't know if Karen did. And they went off to open Smith and the Loyalist. And they had 2 stars for a really long time. Now they have 3. Ever, Curtis Duffy's second restaurant after Grace, still only has 2 Michelin stars. They have never achieved 3 at Ever. And so now there's this really interesting, like, I don't know, like it is so crazy, and we're not going to know from Michelin, I doubt, until that award ceremony actually happens on, again, the November 18th at the Kimmel Center for Performing Arts. And so if you go on the Michelin website, if you go on the app, it's still listed as a 3 Michelin star restaurant. Grant, the post is still live. If I refresh my page right now, yep, it's still live. Again, it's 3,000 likes on this thing. It's been up for an hour. And so, again, I'm just so curious to see where this goes. And again, like, for someone who was incredibly inspired by Alinea, I staged there. I wanted to do my externship there. I've eaten there twice. It's wild to see I'm going to call it a de-evolution of a restaurant like this. So where's your head go, Ray?
Yeah, a couple things. I'll caveat with saying I've never eaten at Alinea, mostly cost prohibitive. Definitely, I've eaten at Next, not Next, Aviary. Actually, the reason I went to Aviary was not for the cocktails, but to try the truffle explosion. It was like my cheapest way to get one of the all-time dishes that I thought would be awesome, and it did not disappoint. So I'll start by saying that in culinary school, Grant Achatz was like who we all looked up to. The Chef's Table comes out. I've read his book, On the Line, I believe it's called. Really, really, like, just impressed with them. Had a cool moment during the pandemic where he joined a clubhouse of mine that I was hosting for Line Cook Thoughts. So, like, I've always looked up to Chef Achatz in many different ways, and also Nick Kokonis. I think they're brilliant business people. I think they're really smart with how they do and conduct their business. So I say that to say, for this, we talk about timelines. Like, it is not updated. The only thing I've seen online so far is I went to Chicago Food Reddit, and last week there was a thread of people kind of just um, going to discuss the Michelin guide. And someone says as long as Alinea is around, they get a star whenever they get 3 stars whenever they want it. And then someone 17 minutes ago just said, "Well, this aged poorly." And there's been some other comments where it seems maybe there's like a comment here where it's like it would be better if Grant treated Alinea like it was in Chicago. And someone else saying Alinea is still a standard bearer for Chicago's fine dining scene to anyone who lives outside the Chicago area. Um, and then they also go ahead and just so there was a lot of, even just up to a week ago, a lot of prediction or assumption that Alinea would stay 3-star, and I think you'd be very smart um, to see that. So regarding this, what I find interesting is I have a friend, a close friend, I won't say who it is, but like he had also gone to dine at Alinea and shared kind of the same um, feedback that you had, that maybe that they lost a step, maybe they lost something in the process over the last few years, whatever that might be. I've never dined there, so I can't speak to it. But he had the same experience as you, and I've seen that experience come up, and I've often wondered. Not that I think they were deserving of, like, I'm not a Michelin inspector, but I have wondered. I keep hearing from people that Alinea, while being maybe a good to great meal, is not the magical 3-star experience that it's been. And I've definitely gone to other 3-star Michelin restaurants where I've heard a lot and been hyped up, and it hasn't met my criteria. So I can definitely understand that, and I kind of chalked it up to that. But to keep hearing that theme come up of maybe they're still not doing their best or they're not where they were, like I can see how they've lost this. For the Chicago dining scene, it's pretty incredible though, because Smith being the only 3-star restaurant is a blow to the city. It really is. And it is a blow to Alinea. And I think you see that in how he has managed to talk about this. I think the biggest thing is for 20 years, Alinea has been devoted to pushing creativity, rigor, and the pursuit of perfection in our craft. He says that the commitment remains. And it's like when you're the standard bearer and you go downhill, like that changes your business. I don't know how much it affects your business, but when you go from 3 to 2, I mean, we've talked about this all the time. Can you charge the prices you've been charging? Can you expect people to pay as much or travel as much or book as much? This does have massive implications, not only for Alinea, but like the Michelin food scene in Chicago. So I'm interested to see where it goes from here. But I agree, it is something that's interesting. I'll say the last thing, they probably notified Grant early because of the respect they have for Grant. Like, it would be so weird, in my opinion, if him or his team showed up in Philly and it was like, Alinea loses 2 stars. Now, it makes me also wonder, did he not take this the best way by posting it? Is he supposed to be posting it with no other information whatsoever? I don't know. I'm not saying like he's doing anything petty. I just don't know. But those are my initial thoughts.
Well, I think it also then like comes out from a scandal perspective. If Grant has known since today, and for the next week, the next 7 days, people are going to be eating at the restaurant and saying, this is a 3 Michelin star restaurant. And as far as Michelin is concerned, it is not. And, it's hard to pinpoint when some of this stuff went downhill. We've also talked about other Grant Achatz businesses in Royster turning to fire and then fire ultimately closing. They have chalked that up more to like financial problems, I'm almost positive, with like the lease and the costs that they were having to bear when it comes to that business and that location. But maybe it's important to say, and I said I would save this for the This Place Called episode, but just maybe this will get some insights into if people want to comment or have a conversation with me over DMs as to what was disappointing about the meal at Alinea. If I may just maybe spend a couple minutes to talk about those things. I do a thing in tasting menu places because I don't typically go for the wine pairing. I think that sometimes it can be like, sometimes relatively cheap wine. Sometimes it is like overwhelming on your palate to have not just the multiple courses of the tasting menu, but then like these constantly changing wine things. I think it also kind of like leaves you, depending on the restaurant and the som, really inebriated at the end of the meal. And that just doesn't feel good in this stage of being a in my 30s dad at the moment. And so what I often do, and I've shared this in previous Going Out to Eat videos, is I will sometimes do this order that I have where I talk to the som team and I let them know that like, I'm really interested in whatever you folks are jazzed about. and I will ask for a glass of bubbles, a glass of white, and a glass of red when they think it makes sense in the tasting menu experience. And for Alinea, they just totally forgot one of the glasses of wine. And again, like at a 3 Michelin star level, like I don't necessarily think that I was like out of bounds by making that request. Number one. Number two, we were at the chef's table. And so like, that's just a very, like, there's from how I was noticing things, like, is there a step of service where actually somebody is just in charge of that? I know that when we would have a private dining room at the restaurant, we would just staff for the private dining room. And especially with all of the ways that they would like set up different table presentations and decor and lighting changes and all of these swaps that they needed to make, there's a lot of hands that touch the table. And for there to just be like a totally missed, beverage service was, again, like, that's a gap. We also were taken into the kitchen for one of the bites, and just like almost every single piece of protein that we had was like super overcooked. And I've talked about that in a lot of modernist, restaurants, because you're typically not cooking in the same way that other places are, where you're taking proteins from raw to cooked during service. You're doing sous vide for multiple minutes or hours beforehand. You're really trying to juggle, again, like really complex presentations. And so you need protein that's going to, quote unquote, last as you kind of get all these things prepared and ultimately shuttled to the table. And so like 3 very distinct dishes, the protein was like either really, really dry or really, really like didn't taste like what it should have tasted like. I'm thinking about like a specific like shrimp cocktail thing that they did. And it was just like they stained the shrimp red so that it looked like, I can't remember if it was shrimp or lobster. This is so long ago, I had to look back at my footage and my notes. But it was really not good. And then the third one was the dessert ending at the last, thing that Grant has kind of like made a namesake for himself. They did like a fog machine and like lights from like the roller rink that you used to go to growing up. And they were playing Superstitious on the, like AV system as they were plating on the table. And it was like just like very like tacky. Like it was not elevated. Like it did not feel like there are ways to do tongue in cheek, like kind of humor, kind of like taking a little bit of the pompousness out of cuisine of that level. I mean, I worked for Thomas Keller, for Christ's sake. Like the salmon cornet is an example of that. The coffee and donuts presentation is an example of that, where it is this like, this is the dessert, but it's coffee and donuts, and look, the coffee part is cold because it's a semi-Freddo. Like that is, to me, the exemplification of like kind of having some fun with it and having some humor. This just felt like cheap, you know what I mean? And so, and also all of the accoutrements for that dessert were just like, it literally was like, they presented it as like a blueberry financier, and it was like the blueberry muffin that's like kind of dry and stale that you get at your hotel breakfast buffet. And so again, I will give all of these thoughts when I actually end up publishing that video when I have time on this paternity leave. But I just like all of those steps of service being off, again, like things kind of Frankenstein from Next, I saw a lot in my meal. Again, if anybody's having any of these experiences that jive with mine, I'd be super curious to hear your thoughts here, because this is like an N of 1 meal. I'm not going to Alinea 3 or 4 times a year like some people do. But I also just looked at World's 50 Best, and Alinea is not on here for 2025. All the way through 100, not just the top 50. For those that don't know, San Pellegrino does the World's 50 Best, and then they also do 51 through 100. And just doing a quick Control F through the page, again, I'm trying to skim this to make sure that I don't get flamed in the comments, but like Alinea is not a World's 50 Best restaurant anymore. And here's the important caveat before we kind of like move on to, again, my first insight that I want to share here on the show. Is I ate at Alchemist in May. That is what Alinea was in 2011. Playfulness, number of courses, pushing the boundaries, R&D team is firing on all cylinders, service staff is just like incredibly attentive and personal. And again, like my wife and I couldn't even drink. She was my girlfriend at the time. She's my wife now, but like we could not drink at Alinea the first time we went. We're 20 years old. Like, and they still, the staff, the front of house staff still treated us like, like they didn't treat us like kids.
Yeah.
And I think that there was a level of hospitality that we experienced at Alinea back in the day that I did not experience on my most recent visit, unfortunately. And this is post-renovation. This is, Chef de Cuisine has changed a couple of times. But again, I want to harp on this because it is, as you shared, Ray, like for people coming up, for even current people looking to like make a name for themselves in fine dining. There are elements of Grant's story, whether or not you exactly want to be an Alinea modernist, like Black Truffle Explosion type of restaurant. There's something about Grant's saga that resonates with you, most of us.
Yep.
And so that I think is like one of the reasons why it's so, again, it's like a punch to the gut to kind of see some of this stuff. And
Reporting
I
now,
think,
reporting
yeah, go
now,
ahead.
Crane Chicago Business. I'm not sure of how reputable they are, but they are reporting that they just got the Alinea was stripped. Michelin just stripped.
Was demoted.
Alinea of its 3-star
Yep.
status, 15-year run as a 3-star Michelin restaurant is over. This sucks. It's always going to lose. Like, there's that dichotomy of the 2-star, right? Like our friend EJ Lagasse, shout out to him. 2 stars at Emerald's. Amazing. Right off the, like, that is so dope. Alinea falls to 2 stars. The world is ending for the restaurant. Do want to just say 15 years of being a 3 Michelin star restaurant is so impressive, and do want to give credit. I've, as you know, I've had my issues with Michelin and what it portrays throughout the industry, but it is a feat, and I'd be lying if I didn't say that I was like, that is an enviable position to be in, to have a 3 Michelin star restaurant for 1 year, 2 years, to have it for more than half of the time I've been alive is pretty incredible. So I do want to say that before we move on.
And yeah, we hope that, the team is able to land on their feet. Like these, again, I'm going to cover it in this next story, but like shows like Knife Edge that just came out on Apple TV that kind of chronicles the way that restaurants kind of push for their Michelin star, their first Michelin star in most of the examples in that show. They do it because there's a real business implication that comes on the other side of these awards and acknowledgments. And so what you hope is that this is something that they're able to bounce back from. I think Grant is, as talented as they come. And so if anybody's going to kind of like step in and do some of this stuff, I think it's going to be them and that team. But I do think that it is this thing where you have to kind of ask yourself, is this a situation where like people are going to lose their jobs? And that's like, again, something that Ray and I just like, we hate talking about that stuff because it's not fun, and it really like affects people's personal lives, not just these like big Titanic brands and restaurants that, will show up in your feed or that get documentaries made about them.